Welcome back to another episode of Legacy Battle. I'm Michael Adams. My panelists tonight from the Gridiron Battle Zone, Brian King from Steelers Nation South, Rollo Coffin. Welcome back to Penn State Collegiate All-Star Kevin Adams. Been a while for him. We have a show for you tonight. It is the Penn State Nittany Lions Mount Rushmore of offensive players. We are joined by Rex Naylor Jr. He is the author of The Forgotten Seasons, Penn State. So we're going to get into that book here a little bit after our debate, and he's going to give his thoughts on all the players as well. Our honorable mentions tonight, guys that just missed the list: Kerry Collins, Blair Thomas, Trace McSorley, Tyler Warren, and Curtis Enos. Nice little selection of players there. But Rex, we want to welcome you and we thank you for joining us.
Glad to be here, folks. Looking forward to it.
Awesome. So we got 8 players to discuss for our Mount Rushmore. We'll pick the top 4 in our opinions, and then Rex gets to pick his own Mount Rushmore out of the 8 that we had here tonight. And Brian, it's your guest, so let's start out with one of your guys.
Okay. All right. So I got first off, I got Curt Warner, 5'11", 205-pound running back out of Pineville, West Virginia. Warner was a standout in high school, but his school was very small, only 90 students in the graduating class. So I imagine there were some questions about, what he would be able to do at a large powerhouse school like Penn State. But Warner, he quickly proved that he belonged. As a freshman in 1979, he led the conference in kick return yards average, and he took one kick back to the house. As a sophomore in 1980, Warner became the main running back. He gained over 1,000 yards from scrimmage. He also continued to return kicks, and he took 2 back for touchdowns. Warner really became something special in his junior season of 1981. He rolled up over 1,100 yards. He scored 8 touchdowns, and he was named an All-American. In 1982, Warner again had an All-American season, picking up almost 1,400 yards, scoring 13 touchdowns, and he was the focal point of the offense. The Nittany Lions went on to win the Sugar Bowl over Georgia, and they won their first national championship. Warner scored a TD in that game. Warner is still 3rd all-time in rushing yards in school history, and he has been inducted into the College Football Hall of Fame.
And we should point out this is Curt Warner with a C, right?
Yes. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, not the Rams guy. Yeah.
Yeah. Rex, Curt went on to have a nice little NFL career there for himself too. What are your thoughts on him? Penn State running backs, as we're going to see tonight, based off of who we're discussing in honorable mentions, they were really hit or miss when they came to the NFL.
Yeah, I think honestly, you picked a good one for start with. I think he's the best running back in Penn State football history. And I say that for many reasons. He had a hamstring nag him in his junior year against Miami of Florida. He went out with a hamstring pull, and Jonathan Williams came in and finished the game, and he was in and out the rest of 81. 82, it nagged him again. And then he had cramps in the Sugar Bowl against Georgia. He did not play much at running back his freshman year. He was a kick returner. Joe Paterno wanted to make sure that seniors, in other words, he favored the seniors back, especially back then, over freshmen. He didn't like to play freshmen much. But Curt Warner allowed Joe Paterno to make one of the best decisions of his entire coaching career in 1980. He moved Booker Moore to fullback and put Curt Warner at tailback. And that was your starting tandem. And that was one of the best moves he ever made in Penn State football history. That started to get the offense moving again with Jeff Hostetler started at year quarterback. Then Todd Blackledge came in. But I think you mentioned the best running back in Penn State football history, in my opinion.
Well, since we're talking running backs, let's stick with some running backs here. Let's knock these running backs out. Kevin, who's your running back?
Heck yeah, we're going with a not hit or miss in the NFL, the recent Super Bowl champion, Saquon Barkley, playing for the Philadelphia Eagles currently. He set several school records for his offensive production over 3 seasons. In 2017, he finished 4th in Heisman voting, 3rd in the Maxwell Award voting. He received multiple national and Big Ten Conference awards and recognition. During his 3-year collegiate career, he set Penn State records for most all-purpose yards at 5,538, most career rushing touchdowns, 43, most career receiving yards by a running back, over 1,100, most rushing yards by a freshman and a sophomore, most total yards in a single game. He had 3,843 rushing yards, making him second in rushing yards, but he played one less season than the player that's ranked number one for Penn State, and he's number one in rushing touchdowns, as I mentioned. Dude got two-time Big Ten Most Valuable Player of the Year, two-time Big Ten Offensive Player of the Year, two-time Big Ten Running Back of the Year, Big Ten Return Specialist, first team All Big Ten 2 times. He was second drafted overall in the 2018 NFL Draft. He's got the stats, he's got the accolades, and man, he would have the rushing yards if he played a 4th season for number one ranked in Penn State history. I think Saquon Barkley is the best running back in Penn State.
Rex, Saquon, I mean, what can you say about this guy? Didn't get them to the college playoff, which I thought might have happened there one season at least, but unstoppable here in the NFL.
Yeah, he's up there. He's gotten Penn State plays at a high rate of speed now. And you've got to look way back. The grind them out days of Curt Warner, the 70s, Cappelletti, they took their time in the huddle. They ran a lot less plays than they do today. This high-powered offense is different, and he benefited from that. What prevents me from putting him up at number one is you look at lost yards from line of scrimmage, and he had a lot of plays where he lost yardage. And there's a lot of backs in Penn State history that you knew they lunged for. Jerome Bettis is a great example. You never saw Jerome Bettis lose yardage. He seemed to always fall forward. Saquon had a lot of carries where he lost yardage. And I was talking to somebody in the NFL, it's an Eagles fan. He said he still does it. But he makes so many spectacular plays. To me, that's the only thing that puts Saquon Barkley in that second realm when I say instead of up at number one was that aspect. But again, it's different generations. He's obviously one of the best running backs in Penn State football history, without a shadow of a doubt. He's an electrifying player. He makes a lot of big plays. And we'll see, and again, time will tell as he gets into the NFL and plays another several years where he stands. Because you're right, there hasn't been a lot of Penn State running backs that played a decade or more consistently at a high level in the NFL. And he may be one of the few that does it.
Rollo, give us one of your running backs.
So I'm going to start with Larry Johnson. Born and raised in State College, he was destined to be a Nittany Lion. His first 3 seasons in Happy Valley, he split carries with Eric McCoo, gaining only 866 yards on the ground and just 6 touchdowns from 99 to 2001. He would add 2 punt returns and a kick return as a junior, giving him 7 total in 2001. But it was in 2002 that the magic really happened, and it became one of the best seasons in Nittany Lions history. He would start his career with 122 scrimmage yards and a receiving TD in his first start as him. Then the next 2 weeks, he would pick up 270 rushing yards and 5 total touchdowns versus Nebraska and Louisiana Tech. But as in week 7 versus Northwestern, he would turn a good season into what would be a magical season. He would pick up 257 yards and 2 touchdowns on just 23 carries. And in 5 of the next 6 games, he would rush for 180-plus yards. And 4 of those games, he would rush for 250-plus yards, including a 327 4-TD game versus Indiana. And in the final game of the regular season, he would rush for 279 yards and 4 touchdowns in the first half against Michigan State. He didn't even play the second half. So imagine what he would have done had he played the entire game. His 2,087 rushing yards was still the single-season highest total in Penn State history, and he is the only player with 2,000 yards in a season for the Nittany Lions. He also has the 4 highest single-game totals in Nittany Lion history, and despite his slow start, he's still 9th all-time rushing on the list. That magical 2002 campaign, he won the Doak Campbell Award, the Maxwell Award, the Walter Campbell, and the Jim Brown Trophy, and he was a unanimous All-American, first-team Big Ten, and he also finished 3rd in the Heisman Trophy voting. He would eventually be drafted in the first round by Kansas City, but that 2002 season, phenomenal.
Rollo, I actually have him at 8th all time. You said 9th?
Yes,
Oh, okay. Because I'm looking at Sports Reference right now. They have him at 8.
I have him as 8 also.
8, yeah. So there you go. 1 up for you. Rex, Larry Johnson. Okay, so he's there from what 99 to 02. He has 2,953 yards. Rollo says he has a 2,000-yard season in there. That what happened all those other years?
Well, the year they lost to Toledo, it might have been 2000. Larry Johnson became very vocal in the locker room after the game against Joe Paterno and put him in a doghouse. And his senior year, he came out of nowhere. I mean, I don't think anybody expected this because we hadn't seen much of him. It was obviously he was a better running back than Eric, or as Fran Fisher would say, Eric Choo Choo McCoo back in the day. And I think Omar Easy may have been there. And he was a little, I thought he'd have been a little better than that. But Larry Johnson had a tremendous year. And again, when you look at that year, that was one of those years where the Big Ten had 4 really good teams and the rest not so good. And there were 3 games that year he didn't break 100 yards, and they were all against, I think, Iowa, Ohio State, and Michigan, the big ones. But then he had unbelievable games against Indiana, Northwestern, Michigan State, as you stated, Rollo. That Michigan State game, I remember you handed him the ball if he gained 50 yards about every time he touched it. It was just one of those games that was unbelievable. And I don't know, a running back sometimes is only goes as far as his offensive line. So I don't know if the offensive line was limited against those other 3 teams. I really don't know. They get into the bowl game. I think it was the Florida Citrus Bowl against Auburn. And Larry Johnson struggled a little bit to find an opening. Again, it might not have been him. Might have been there just was no opening there. I think he had 50 or 60 yards. It could be wrong. But that and playing that only that one year, I often said I would like to have seen what he did had he would have stayed out of the doghouse and played maybe in 2000 and 2001 a little bit more. He may be your all-time leading rusher.
Well, I'm the only person tonight not representing a running back, so I'm going to have to bring you a wide receiver here, and I'm going Bobby Ingram, and I used to rock the Chicago Bears Bobby Ingram jersey back in the day. Played from 93 to 96 at Penn State. He is 5th all-time in receptions, despite being on a run-heavy team during his tenure. And his 3,026 receiving yards is first in school history, as is his 31 touchdowns for a career, 13 in a season, and 4 in one game. Those are all Penn State records he still holds today. So that's been holding strong for almost 30 years now. Actually, it is 30 years. Wow. I'm getting old. He was 3-time first team All Big Ten. He made his first, second, third team All-American. And in 94, he won the Blitnikoff Award as the best wide receiver in college football. That says a lot to me right there. All this, plus he was a great punt returner. I think people forget about how good he actually was at punt returns. He's 2nd all time in yards at Penn State on punt returns. And, of course, he helped Penn State to the undefeated season in 1994. Whether or not they deserve the national championship is a debate that's been done by this show. But, you can form that opinion for yourself. And, as I stated, he was successful in the NFL as a wideout. He even made the Seahawks 35th anniversary team. So, he turned into a nice little player there when he did turn pro. But Rex, Bobby Ingram, I know Kevin's got a wide receiver coming up here in a little bit, but is Bobby Ingram the best wide receiver?
He's one of them. He is another kid that started out in the doghouse. He and I think Ricky Sales, or I don't quote me on that, stole stereo equipment from a room. I did have a chance to speak briefly with him after a Penn State game, and Bobby said that turned his life around. So sometimes we all have moments. We've all done things we shouldn't have done, and he took advantage of that. You have to understand too with Bobby Ingram. When you look at Penn State, you have Kerry Collins, Kyle Brady, Kijana Carter, John Whitman, Brian Milne, and not only Bobby Ingram but Freddie Scott, all on the same team, all in the same starting lineup, trying to share the ball. And he has all those accolades playing around that system with all those guys trying to share the ball. 3 of them were top 10 draft choices. And then I think a testament to his career was 1995. Wally Richardson comes in as a quarterback to replace Kerry Collins. And Penn State has another real good season. and he and Freddie Scott are back. But again, Kijana Carter's gone, Kyle Brady's gone, Kerry Collins is gone. A couple people in the offensive line are gone, even though most of them are back. The game against Michigan State, the last regular season game, culminates Bobby Ingram's career when he caught that inside screen pass at the 5-yard line and went across the goal line to score the game-winning touchdown. I think there were under 5 seconds left. That to me culminated his career at Penn State. And I think he goes underrated for many reasons. I think one of which you mentioned, Penn State was always run heavy, even though they threw the ball a lot with Collins there. The end of the 93 season into 94, they did throw the ball a lot more. To me, up to that point, was the best offense in NCAA football history. Again, that's my opinion. But, yeah, I think Bobby Ingram, I think it's going to be hard to argue anybody that would be ahead of him as a wide receiver. Maybe some of the younger guys in recent years. I think there's another guy on your list, Allen Robinson, and some other guys that had some really good seasons. But I think Bobby Ingram has got to be up there in one or two.
Let's go back to running back, Brian.
All right, got John Cappelletti, 6'1", 215-pound running back out of Drexel Hill, PA. He actually spent his freshman and sophomore season as a DB, but then came back to running back the next year as a junior. So he had a really nice 1972 season as a junior, 4.8 yards per carry, 101.5 yards per game. He scored 13 touchdowns. Nittany Lions offense definitely ran through him. He had the 8th most touches in the entire nation. 1973 as a senior, incredible season for Cappelletti. He averaged 5.3 yards per carry, 138.4 yards per game. He scored 17 total touchdowns. He had the 3rd most rushing yards in the nation and the 3rd most TDs. After the season was over, he cleaned up with the accolades. Unanimous All-American, Maxwell Award, Walter Camp Award, and the big one, the Heisman Trophy. And he also led Penn State to an undefeated season. Sadly, Cappelletti's kid brother, Joey, was suffering from leukemia in 1973. And before a game against West Virginia, John famously asked Joey what he could do for his birthday. Joey asked John, score 4 touchdowns for him. And on that afternoon in October, John found a way to do it. That story was later made into a movie called Something for Joey.
So even going this far back, he still had Joe Paterno as a coach. So tell us about John. And I mean, obviously this is before a lot of our times here, but what was he like on the field? And was there any competition for the Heisman that year with him?
Yeah. Do you know who the runner-up to the Heisman was that year?
I do not.
Offensive lineman Hicks out of Ohio State.
Oh, wow.
His first name escapes me, but he had a great NFL career. He was really, really good. Yeah, that was, when you look at Penn State, how you not have John Cappelletti on a Mount Rushmore. He's the only Heisman Trophy winner. The story about his kid brother and all that. One thing about John is, do I think he's the best running back that ever played over Penn State? No, I don't. I'm not gonna lie to you. I say Curt Warner, Saquon Barkley's up there. Some of the ones we mentioned. Larry Johnson, I think, may have been had he played more. But when you look at Cappelletti, look at the number of carries he had in some of those games his senior year. 40, 35, 40, 45 carries every game. They said his legs were all black and blue, and he had to soak them in ice baths until Thursday. He couldn't even practice. And then he would suit him up and wrap him up and then run him out there again. John was opposite of Saquon Barkley. He didn't lose yards. If he did, it was rare. He found a hole, and he hit the hole. What was amazing about me, Cappelletti was a load. And I was privileged enough to see 3 or 4 game films of him. And I have all the Penn State highlights from the 1960 on permanently. So I get a chance to go back and watch a lot of that. And talking with his teammates in my podcast, Talking Penn State Football History, I've interviewed a lot of those guys and featured them. This guy was huge. He didn't play his first 2 years because Lydell Mitchell and Franco Harris were in the backfield. And that's, you're not going to crack that lineup.
Yeah, they were pretty good, yeah.
Yeah, they were pretty good. You got that right. And then they graduate in 71 after that season, and then John in 72 and 73. And people forget in 72, they lost to Tennessee the first game of the season, 28-21 in Knoxville. First game under lights at Neyland Stadium. And they didn't lose again until the Sugar Bowl, and Cappelletti was sick with the flu and didn't play. So you're talking about a 12-0 season in 73 and a 10-2 season in 72. So that's 22-2 in those 2 years. He did win the Heisman Trophy, I think deservedly so. I think there was a great story around that. But he's a different type of running back. Tommy Donchez, who just passed away, he was another one of those guys that just would carry after carry after carry and get you 3, 4, 5 yards. And they methodically went down the field. Whereas you look at Saquon, for example, more modern, you're going to hand me the ball and he could break it at any time and score. That was a little different type of an offense. And Cappy would just, he had some speed, but if you look at his thighs, if you watch his highlights and you look at his thighs, that man was huge. I mean, he's like Jerome Bettis. You didn't want to get hit by him. And that's what amazed me. And then, of course, people forget he transitioned into a fullback for the Rams and the Chargers. He played in that Ice Bowl game, the AFC Championship game against Cincinnati when it was like 10 below zero. He was the Chargers fullback. He played a good many years, but he converted to fullback. And he had a pretty good career in the NFL as a fullback. But yeah, it's one of those guys you think he almost has to be there on the face of Mount Rushmore, but he's not maybe one of the top 3 running backs, maybe top 5, in my opinion, if you're going by stats.
Rollo, finish out the running backs.
I got Kenneth Leonard Carter. What most college football fans know him as Kijana. He was a star in basketball and track in Westerfield, Ohio. But he chose Penn State over his native Ohio State Buckeyes because as he put it, he wanted to gain his own independence. So he chose Happy Valley. It would be a great decision as he has wound up as one of the best offensive players in Nittany Lions history. As a freshman, he saw limited action, getting only 42 carries, but he averaged 6.3 yards per carry that year and 4 touchdowns. In 93, he would be named starter, but he split carries with Mike Archie. And despite having only 23 more carries than Archie, he had 260 more yards because of the 6.6 yards per carry that led the Big Ten. But in 1994, Kijana showed why he's possibly the best running back in PSU history. He wound up second in the Heisman voting as he was 4th in the country in rushing yards, 2nd in the country in rushing touchdowns, and 1st in the nation in yards per carry, helping pace the 94 Nittany Lions to 47 points per game and a 12-0 record. But because they were in the Big Ten, they had to face Oregon in the Rose Bowl because of contracting. But I believe they could have possibly beat Nebraska. But in the bowl game, the first play from scrimmage, he ran for an 83-yard tutty on the first play, and he finished his career with 156 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns, picking up the Rose Bowl MVP. He is the only Nittany Lion with 3+ 80+ yard touchdowns in a season. And despite only playing 3 seasons, he left Happy Valley as the 5th all-time in rushing yards. And until this season, he was still 10th all-time until he was passed by Katron Allen and Nick Singleton. He is still the all-time leader in PSU history with 7.2 yards per carry with people over 100+ yards. He is 4th all-time in touchdowns. He is the only Nittany Lion offensive player to go be drafted first overall in the draft, getting picked by the Bengals. He was a unanimous All-American in 94, first team All-Big Ten 94, second team All-Big Ten 1993. And of course, I mentioned he was second in the Heisman voting in 94.
Kijana Carter was an absolute stud in college. Was he the best player on the 94 team? And what do you think went wrong for him when the NFL time came?
Me?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay. No, that's okay. I didn't want to interrupt anybody. Let me tell you about Kijana Carter. I happened to be down watching a game in 94. I think it was a Northwestern game. I don't know if he saw this guy's calves. This guy's had biggest calves I've ever seen. And I thought, now I know why he can run. He's one of those guys, if you look back, my favorite running back of all time at Penn State, and this is going to kind of sound funny, is Richie Anderson. And he played right before Kijana Carter. Richie Anderson was one of those guys, he'd go on a sweep and need 2 yards, and if he knew he was going to get balled up, he'd dive over the top. I thought he had speed and power. He prevented Kijana from playing his first 2 years, 91 and 92. And I think O.J. McDuffie was out from around Westerville, Ohio. I think he might have helped bring him to Penn State. But when it was obvious to me that Kijana Carter was the best running back of the three, but they had Carter, Mike Archie, who was better out of the backfield, and Stephen Pitts, who played a little bit with the 49ers. There were 3 pretty good running backs. And Carter, played a short period of time. He's another one. Larry Johnson, Kijana Carter. There's another one, Curtis Enos. Might have been better than any of them. Of power and speed. But these guys, had they been in the system of Cappelletti, carry after carry after carry after carry, flip a coin for the 3 of them. It's because you might have been 1, 2, 3 and pick any order that you want. Kijana Carter was that good. And remember, he broke his thumb or injured his thumb, ligaments, whatever. I think he had to have a screw put in. And in the Illinois game that they came back in, you'd see his one of his, I think it's on his right hand, he had it taped up like a cast, soft cast on it. So he missed a little bit of time. I don't think he missed a game, but he missed a little bit of time in that 94 season and still did what he did. Kijana Carter, it's hard to argue with that guy. And Rollo, that play you mentioned in the Rose Bowl, a couple of things. You see the acceleration through the hole. You see the power when he hit that tackler and ran right over him. And then he broke away and you saw the speed breaking away. To me, that's his epitomized run of his career, because that shows his strength, his power, his quickness into the hole, and his blinding speed when he got out in the open field. He was one of my favorites. He's good.
Kevin, give us your last player.
All right, so my last player, when we came up with the list of players, he was not on as an option, so I actually added him on because I'm strong about this player. And he put up these numbers, I want to point out, in just 2 seasons. So, he played 3. Ingram played 4. I'd say both of their first seasons are kind of a wash. They both had only 3 and 4 receptions in their first seasons. But Robinson did these numbers in 2 seasons. Currently playing for Detroit Lions in the NFL. He played for the Nittany Lions between 2011 and 2013, which I also want to point out is right after the whole Joe Paterno, Sandusky, child sex abuse scandal, the death penalty at Penn State. Players were leaving. Our best quarterback was Matt McGloin. Did not have the offensive caliber team that Bobby Ingram had back in the day. So I just want to point that out. The man still earned first-team All-American honors in 2013, first-team All-Big Ten in 2012 and 13, as well as he got the Big Ten Receiver of the Year award both of those seasons. He was selected by the Jacksonville Jaguars in the second round of the 2014 draft. He ranks 4th currently in receptions with Penn State. He had 177, which is only 10 behind Bobby Ingram. He was 5th in receiving yards. He had 2,474, which is only about 550 behind Bobby Ingram. He was 9th in receiving touchdowns, which he had 17, which is 24 behind Bobby Ingram, but Bobby Ingram had Kerry Collins thrown to him, not Matt McGloin. So I think he has strong numbers. He holds a single season receiving record at 1,432 yards for Penn State, which is about 400 more yards than Ingram ever had in a season. He's tied for 3rd in a single season TDs at 11, tied for 2nd with 3 in a game. For most per game. And if you go to ranker.com, where fans can actually vote and rate wide receivers for Penn State, they did top 50. They actually have Allen Robinson at number 2, and Bobby Ingram's at number 3 for top 50 of all time at Penn State. So better team for Ingram. We had the death penalty, the child sex abuse going on, and he still put up his numbers in 2 seasons. I think he has a strong argument here.
Rex, this was a new Penn State, a new offense, new everything at this time period. How did Allen do so well?
I think Kevin hit the nail on the head with Ingram. Played on an undefeated team, which I thought was the best team in the country. I think they wanted to give Tom Osborne a championship. Not that he didn't deserve it, but he ended up winning a couple later. I think had they known that, they'd have given Penn State the championship. But that's neither here nor there. Allen Robinson, and remember, Joe Paterno's there in 2011. And this is another guy that came out of nowhere and is kind of under the radar. Outstanding receiver. I'm a Steeler fan, so I think we had him last year, 2 years ago, I believe we had him. People forget too. It's interesting. Matt McGloin was there in 11 and 12, but in my opinion, had Bill O'Brien stayed, Christian Hackenberg may have ended up being the best quarterback in Penn State history. James Franklin, he did not fit his offense. James did not talk to him when he took the job over. It did not go well. And that's about all I know. I just know he didn't fit in James Franklin's offense like a McSorley did. And and for Bill O'Brien to bring in guys like, stay with Matt McGloin, some of these run-ons they called them, walk-on kids, and to have 2 winning seasons. Allen Robinson was one of the reasons why. And he played there were several tight ends, and that pro offense that O'Brien had, moving people all over the place. Those kids do not get enough credit. 8-4 and 7-5, I believe. And he put Zach Zwinnig back there as the running back. I believe it was his name, number 28. And he had a couple 1,000-yard seasons, I believe, when they ran that single back set. Allen Robinson, again, and it was the main receiver. They threw a ball with a lot of tight ends. And Matt McGloin, honestly, was probably a Division II quarterback. I went to Shippensburg, which is Division II, and that's probably where they thought he did belong, but he walked on at Penn State, got a scholarship, I believe. And remember that Bolton that was there with Matt McGloin in 2011 that ended up nowhere and ended up benched. That was an interesting 2010. So Robinson went through a lot, and to have the numbers that he had, he benefited for playing in a pro-style offense on Bill O'Brien, but he didn't have necessarily the great skill players that an Ingram did. So I think Allen Robinson is. When I saw that name, I looked at it, and then I started looking at the numbers. I thought, I don't give the guy enough credit. I think absolutely he belongs up there.
Well, our final player tonight is our only quarterback, and that is Chuck Fusina, 1975 to 1978. He is 9th all-time in school passing yards, but played in a different era when passing was kind of, mute back then. It was definitely not the emphasis, but in 1978, he's a unanimous All-American, first-team All-East, and he won the Maxwell Award given to the best all-around player in college football. And he was runner-up for the Heisman that year, so almost picked up a Heisman. His record as a starter was 29-3, and that includes an 11-0 1978 season. He also made the cover of Sports Illustrated during that time. I believe it was November of 78 issue. So people might not realize today what making the cover of Sports Illustrated meant back in the 1970s. That was an absolutely huge thing. So for him to be on that says something about his broadened appeal countrywide. And then Chuck went on, he played in the USFL, had a really nice career there in the USFL. I think people forget about that. I think he had like 30 touchdown passes one season there. So very impressive. 2015, he went into the Pennsylvania Sports Hall of Fame, inducted there. That was the same year as Paterno and kicker Matt Barr. So went in with his teammate and his coach. Rex, this is going way back. So tell us about Chuck and that magical 1978 season there.
Now be careful when you say way back, because Chuck's on the cover of my book. I know Chuck well. He has a tailgate every year for all the older guys that I get a chance to go over with. It's quite an honor. It's very humbling. And this year coming up, I believe it's the 5th game of the season. I'd have to go back and double check. Chuck, interesting. I think you'll find he lost 4 games. In 76 that he started, Pitt and then Notre Dame in the Gator Bowl. He lost to Kentucky in 77 and then Alabama in the Sugar Bowl in 78. Because they ended up at 11-1. When I wrote about those two teams, they were 11-1, and they were 2 days being 10-1. They were 2 days away from being shut out of a bowl game in '77. There weren't many back then, and there was an argument over the Gator Bowl I wrote about in my book. But I think when you look at Penn State quarterbacks, right now you have three: Chuck Fusina, Kerry Collins, and Todd Blackledge. Trace McSorley over time may end up jumping into that realm. Some of the guys on the backside, like honorable mention, Milt Plum, who I was fortunate enough to interview. He played in 1953 and 4, with Lenny Moore. Tom Schumann, who took over for Huffnagel and then guided the 13 or 12-0 1973 team, and then he went 10-2 in '74. You have to throw John Schaefer in there, who won Penn State's second national championship. And there's some other ones that you would probably eventually put in there. Maybe Drew Aller would get in there. I'm not sure yet. His legacy is yet to be determined. But Chuck Fusina, my favorite quarterback of all time. He will tell you he wasn't the best player in the country because that's the year Billy Sims won the Heisman, but Chuck got more first-place votes. Chuck was one of those guys that got everything out of his talent. He couldn't run real fast. He didn't have a huge arm, but he was smart, highly intelligent. And his predecessor, John Andrus, said, yeah, back then we were allowed to throw the ball 3rd and 8, 3rd and 12, obvious passing situations. Other than that, we're going to hand it off as a quarterback. So you'll find when they lost to Kentucky in '77, Chuck had 200 yards at halftime, throwing the ball through the rain, pouring down rain. And Joe got conservative and fell on the ball. And then the next game against Utah State, I think he ran the ball 78 times out of 90 total plays to get back to being a tough, quote unquote, tough running team. So Chuck played through that. But I think you hit the nail on the head. If you look at his USFL statistics, I don't know how many thousands of yards he threw for in 3 years. It was unbelievable amount of yardage. And he got the Philadelphia/Baltimore Stars to the USFL championship 3 years in a row, and I think he won 2 of them. And that was a pretty good league back then because they were getting all the third-year players because you had to be 4 years to get to the NFL, but USFL, you could come out after 3. That's what changed the rule. And, I think that's when you look at Chuck, that's when you realize, watch some of those films, Chuck was pretty good. And I think he's my favorite quarterback. But again, when you look at the 3 of them, Chuck Fusina, Todd Blackledge, Kerry Collins, and put them in any order you want.
Let's move into our vote. Cannot pick your own. Brian, who are you taking?
Okay, I'm gonna. This is just really tough. I think you gotta have Kijana Carter up there.
Okay. Rollo?
Well, Bobby Ingram, he played with guys like Joey Galloway and Terry Glenn, big play receivers, and he's putting up numbers as good as they were. So you got to put Bobby Ingram up there.
Kevin?
Let's go with your quarterback.
Oh, thank you. All right, yeah, man. I'm looking at this list and I think a Mount Rushmore is different than when we do a top 5. When you do a top 5, you should straight up picking the 5 best players. But a Mount Rushmore isn't. It's more than just their stats and who's the best players. Like, what did they do that stood out? I mean, George Washington is the first president. I wouldn't say he's one of the top 4, and he's on the Mount Rushmore.
Right.
So like to me, Cappelletti has the Heisman Trophy. How can you not have the only Heisman Trophy winner on the Mount Rushmore? So I got to take Cappelletti. So our Mount Rushmore is Kijana Carter, John Cappelletti, Bobby Ingram, Chuck Fusina. Rex, out of our 8 tonight, who would be your Mount Rushmore?
I'd have to say Chuck Fusina, or I won't be invited to the tailgates anymore. Just kidding. But I wrote about those guys. I'm going to give you a wild card after this. I think, as I said before, I don't think he's the best running back, but how you don't have a John Cappelletti up there. They made a movie about him. He was their only Heisman Trophy winner. Honorable guy, had a good NFL career. I think he's up there. Whether he's in the top 5 or not, is debatable. But when you talk athletes, I'm going to throw a guy out here. It might have been one of the best, if not top 5 best athletes ever to play. There's Mike Gooman. you look at his stats. Mike was drafted in the 13th round by the Texas Rangers to play baseball. He could have gone anywhere to play football. He had 2 50-point games in high school without a 3-point line. Browntown's Bethlehem Catholic, excuse me. Mike played kickoff returner his freshman year in 76, and he was one of 7 parade All-Americans of the 50 that Joe Paterno got in 76. And he played kickoff returner. He returned punts. He played tailback in the middle of the 77 season. There were injuries. Joe Paterno moved him from starting tailback to defensive back. 1978, he moves back to tailback at the beginning of the 79 season, his senior year. They have trouble at wide receiver. They move Mike Gooman to a starting wide receiver flanker position. Then eventually move him back to tailback. And Joe Paterno said if I needed him to play quarterback, he could do so. He never bowled before and took a bowling class and rolled a 298. And he took a tennis class and never played tennis before and beat the Penn State tennis coach, who was the instructor. Matt Millen said he was one of the best athletes, bar none, that he ever played with. And that included Lester Hayes and all the Raiders guys that he was with. So I wanted to make a mention of that because Mike was moved all over God's creation on the football field and never had a chance to settle in anywhere, but had a pretty good career, drafted in the 6th round by the Rams. And he holds, as Eric Dickerson says, when Mike Gooman said, you still have the record, he said, no, we do. Mike was his fullback with the Rams in the 80s and played 8 seasons. So, and he's not the only one, but there's a lot of guys like this throughout Penn State football history. It's a very, very rich tradition. I don't think you can go wrong with anybody that was mentioned tonight.
Fair enough. Let's move into our Q&A. One question each tonight, guys. Same order we did, Brian, Kevin, Rollo, me.
Okay. So, Rex, you can get into as much detail or not with this one, but it's totally up to you. But the Joe Paterno statue, do you think it should be on display, or do you think it should be put away?
On display.
On display.
Yeah, I've read a lot I would encourage everybody to read and then make your own opinions. There's a book out here, The Most Hated Man in America, Jerry Sandusky, that has nothing but a lot of facts in it. It will make you think about how much of that really happened. I don't think Joe knew anything about it. I'm almost positive he didn't. I've spoken with people. A lot of times we convict a man of doing something wrong or a female, and we're always out to find they couldn't have just been this person. There had to have been other people. And we have a tendency in society with social media to go on these witch hunts. And I think time will show it belongs back. They're trying to get the field named Paterno Field. There's a big push to do that. I was just contacted by a player that played 72 that's kind of heading this up. And they want to name it Paterno Field at Beaver Stadium. So, yeah, I think it should be back up.
All right, so I saw a picture of you outside Beaver Stadium with one of the players that you wrote about in your book, Mike. You're tailgating with him, it looked like. But my question's about Penn State and the stadium in general. They're going through the renovations, obviously. Going to make it more enclosed. How do you feel about the atmosphere at Penn State, and what does that mean to their home field advantage, and what do you think of the renovations that are going to be coming?
I'm inconclusive on it. I hated it. I have with my publishing company, I'm a financial advisor by trade, but my publishing company, I have a branding agent, and he actually played for Utah State against Penn State in 77. And he came to my house. He lives in New Jersey, and Dave Parkin's his name. And I took him to the hotel he stayed with in my town, Lewistown. And we took the bus route the way he would have gone in 77. And he remembered the stadium. When we pulled up where they just tore the press box down, he said, "Oh my heavens," he said, "You just brought me back 50 years ago." And so there's a lot of that. I don't go to a lot of games because to me it's an adult amusement park. I'm not into the singing, and I'm not into all the stuff. You don't even hear the Blue Band much anymore. I used to like to listen to them. I don't know. I'm inconclusive on it. I think they need some renovations. $700 million worth. Maybe you could build a brand new stadium with some of the ground you own somewhere else. I don't know. But how many other steel erected stadiums are there in the country? Not many. And you're basically going to remove some of that. And so I don't know. I'm an old guy. I'm getting old anyway. So maybe I'm out of touch with things, but I kind of liked it the way it was. I will tell you, I did go, if they tailgate on a game that's on at noon, I go to the game because they'll tailgate before and then they'll tailgate afterwards. If it's a 3:30 or 7, living only 30 miles away, I pay a parking pass, go to the tailgate, and then go home and watch it. But I was in the stadium in 2022 in September to see him play Central Michigan, and the paint was chipping. It just looked unkempt, worse than I'd ever seen it. And I thought all you need is a coat of paint here, a coat of paint there, some upgrades here and there. But again, I didn't see the whole stadium. Apparently, they need handicap accessible, more of that, elevators and things like that. And if you're going to do that, maybe you go ahead and do this. My only concern is this: Penn State's spending an awful lot of money to not win a national championship or even be in the game. Mr. Franklin's getting $7 to $8 million, whatever he makes a year. They're bringing in all these other coaches. I'm not blaming anybody, but you're going to spend $700 million. And how long is it going to be before the natives don't start getting a little restless here? They are. We're putting money into here. My heavens, I think they're paying their athletic director $2.5 million now. It's unbelievable. And okay, you throw all this money at things. Where are we? When's enough? I am a little concerned about that because I don't think they have a lot of room to spend elsewhere.
Well, they're spending that $700 million in a stadium, but then I heard they're possibly closing 12 satellite campuses.
They are going to close a lot. Yeah. Yeah.
Good, Rollo.
So Rex, Penn State's had a lot of great teams, 3 national championships. But you wrote about 2 teams in 77 and 78 that went 22-2. What was it about those 2 teams that made you want to write a book about those 2 teams?
Very good question. I was born in 1967, so I was 10 years old at the time. And at the time, you could only get those college teams could only be on television 5 times in 2 years, not counting bowl games. So you would only get Penn State twice a year, maybe. And they had their own highlight show. So I never forget my stepfather came out and told me, "You're watching it again." So I get up Sunday morning at 8 o'clock, the Penn State 2-hour game would be on. Well, on another channel, it might start at 9. So when it was over at 10, I turned the other one on, watched the second half again. And then there was a third one that was on. And he said, "Boy, you're crazy." And but we hung on everything. He worked in the steel mill. He'd bring home the Harrisburg Patriot or the Center Daily Times and say, "Hey, there's some articles in here about Penn State." I'd devour them because you didn't get much news back then. And I fell in love with those teams because they were so good. And Mike Gooman became an investment wholesaler of mine, the guy I talked about. He got me to Matt Millen, Chuck Fusina, Matt Suey, those guys. And I wrote a book to get better at writing. And those teams I was endeared to because I hung on everything back then. And it wasn't like it is today. You can watch I think the last time Penn State wasn't on broadcast either online or television was the 2002 Kent State game, which goes back 22 years ago. So people forget what it was like when we were kids and you couldn't get every game. So I remember hanging on the radio, just waiting for the highlights to come on, a delayed version, and watching it 2 and 3 times. And they were good, solid teams. And I can tell you, not one person I met failed me as a role model. Every one of those guys I met were good people, every one of them. And it was just kind of, and again, as Mike Gooman said, Penn State's even forgotten about those teams. So that's why I chose those 2 teams.
You mentioned earlier that you have a podcast. So tell us about your podcast and where people can find it.
It's on it's on most all the podcasting services, Spotify, iHeartRadio, etc. And the website is pennsports.live. That's PENN sports.live. Hover over the podcast tab, and there's one on college football history and Penn State football history there. I've done about 65, 70 interviews with former players, and it's devoted from the mid 60s through the early 90s, so to speak. Jeff Hardings and Kyle Brady are some of the newer ones that I did. I did do one on, I just lost his name, Milt Plum, the quarterback in the 53-54 season. So Charlie Pittman, I've done Charlie Pittman. I did a tribute to Franco Harris with some of his teammates. And if Penn State players die, I end up getting some teammates around if I can, and I do a tribute show to those people. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. I just got Ron Hostetler's featured this week. Jeff's brother, he played linebacker, and yeah, I just got some nice comments on that. I have a lot of fun with it. Keeps me alive, keeps me out of trouble. And it's free. You can go to the site. It's all available for you.
Awesome.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Rex, for coming on and sharing with us tonight. We appreciate your time.
No problem. Anytime, boys. Thank you so much.
Everybody who's watching this, make sure you hit that like, subscribe button, and also pick up that book from Rex, The Forgotten Season, Penn State. Sounds really good, everybody. So I'm sure you can find it on Amazon and everywhere you find books, and check out his podcast as well. Thank you for joining us tonight. We'll see everybody next time.